Assassins work in the shadows, sneaking through corridors, diving in hay piles, and hiding in plain sight. They use agility and acrobatics to move silently and unseen. They use tools like smoke bombs, bows, darts, and knives to aid them during missions. And we know most of this, we see this all the time, and most of us play this way. But how about the Templars? How do they do stealth? I mean, most people will probably think of Haytham or Shay when you say Templars in the context of Assassin's Creed. Oh, and some may also think of the Borgias, Al-Mualim, Robert de Sab, maybe even Alfred or Elise as well. And this is a very assorted group of individuals, with different skills, abilities, and ways of operations. And so it is kind of hard to think of just one specific way of how a Templar would accomplish a stealth mission. But that is what I'll try to accomplish with this video. Let's start this by dissecting the Templar philosophy. If we try to put the Templars' ideas into a few words, I think the rooftop scene with Haytham in AC3 sums it up perfectly.
What is it the Templars truly seek?
Order. Purpose. Direction. No more than that. It's your lot that means to confound with this nonsense talk of freedom. Time was. The assassins professed a far more sensible goal. That of peace.
Freedom is peace.
Oh no. It's an invitation to chaos.
Order, purpose, direction. These are what the Templars aim for, and it also reflects their methods. Order is conveyed in the way they organize themselves and dominate different aspects of society, whether in an organizational structure or through their operations. Purpose is displayed through their aim to bring peace to the world through order and discipline, whatever the cost. It also reflects how they give purpose to certain individuals to control them. Direction is manifested through how they manipulate individuals or other groups to achieve certain goals and outcomes. And from these three ideas, I think we can establish a method of play in an Assassin's Creed game to reflect the philosophy. Now before we proceed, I know that some Templar Order, like the Borgias, may not share Haytham's sentiments or have a more selfish agenda. And I also know about some Templar agents who are borderline psychopathic, or maybe even actual psychos, so they are definitely doing stealth very differently and in very unique ways. But for simplicity's sake, we will try to translate the Templar philosophy into gameplay so we can establish contextual limitations when doing stealth. And so I think we can agree with order, purpose, and direction. So yeah, let's start with order. So how do we show the philosophy of order through stealth gameplay? Well, since I've defined order as the way that the Templars organize themselves and dominate, whether in an organizational structure or through their operation, I think order can be shown through the idea of dominance over subtlety. Let's visualize it in a gameplay context since it might be easier to understand. So say if a Templar agent is on a stealth mission, and they have to sneak through an enemy camp. Now the objective is not to assassinate, but to plant a fake evidence, just to change things up a bit. I think this is aligned with how Templars operate anyway, since they like to utilize coercion and manipulation over straight up assassinating their enemies. So a Templar operating under the idea of dominance over subtlety will want to always have the upper hand. They will use tools, preferably long-range ones, to deal with guards if they have no choice. Maybe a poison dart, a silent tempo, a bow, or even various types of bombs. I chose ranged weapons to minimize risks, since I'd like to think that a Templar would want to have full control and overview of a situation always. So utilizing ranged weapons and tools will ensure that you will always oversee everything. However, if push comes to shove, any melee weapons like swords, polearms, and maces are fair game. Poison is also something that a Templar would not shy away from, so poisoning arrows or even blades is a welcome strategy. Then from here, we can further express dominance through crowd control abilities. A good example of this is in Valhalla with how Eivor can stun enemies and then perform finishers. By stunning enemies, whether through enough stun damage or hitting weak points, Eivor dominates the battlefield and her enemies through this mechanic. However, since the goal in the hypothetical scenario is to plant evidence, the Templar agent would likely prefer it if they don't have to kill someone. After all, if you kill everyone, there will be no one left to control. So instead, I think utilizing fear and shock is something a Templar would also use for non-lethal methods. For example, if we are in 16th century Europe and there is a huge fear of witches and dark magic, releasing a barrel full of toads during a chilly night would surely make superstitious guards run away. And then obviously, if the gameplay allows it, using speech-type abilities like coercion and blackmail is something the Templars will likely use. But I doubt we'll see that in an Assassin's Creed game. Next, let's proceed with the idea of purpose. So we define purpose as the Templars aim to bring peace to the world through order and discipline, whatever the cost. I want to emphasize here the phrase whatever the cost, since it perfectly captures the Templars' willingness to do anything to achieve their goal. Nothing is permitted to them, wink wink. And so in the context of stealth gameplay, this is mainly the freedom to do anything as long as you achieve the goal. So you can use any type of weapons and any methods, whether considered good or evil. There is no limit, except for technical limitations in games. So for example, based on the scenario earlier with the goal of planting fake evidence, anything goes. If you need to kill guards in order to successfully complete the mission, so be it. Obviously, ghosting through the camp would be ideal for a cleaner operation, but as we have said, whatever the cost. This also means that using forbidden weapons like for example biological weapons or even Isu artifacts is fine as long as the mission is fulfilled. So poisons or even disease-infested tools can be used against hostiles. Blackmail, intimidation, lying, and other interactions that may seem antisocial or unethical are also fair game. Lastly, let's talk about the philosophy of direction. As I've tried to define earlier, direction is manifested through how they manipulate individuals or other groups to achieve certain goals and outcomes. Templars do this by infiltrating powerful and influential circles, then either putting themselves in high positions or finding a way to influence the decisions of those in power. And to accomplish all this, Templars utilize their mastery of social stealth. And they use their skills in social stealth in varying degrees. They can use it to infiltrate areas where an objective is. For example, if they have to get into a castle or a building, they'll use social stealth to gain entry by posing as a noble or simply get an invitation from one of their contacts. Though I think it is important to emphasize that most Templars will likely use a disguise that gives them power. Like as I've said, they'll disguise as a noble or maybe a high-ranking guard officer. This is different from how assassins may prefer to disguise themselves as beggars, monks, and common merchants to hide themselves and keep away from prying eyes. However, obviously, depending on the mission, a Templar might still go for these types of disguises when necessary. Then, since Templars tend to be master manipulators, it is also a possibility for them to use crowds and groups of people to accomplish their objectives. I can see Templars rallying a crowd to besiege a castle, hunt down an individual who everyone knows is a witch, or maybe a non-violent criminal. They can use these crowds to either mask an escape, open an infiltration opportunity, or to directly deal with their targets. And that is basically it. That is how I think a Templar agent would operate in a stealth mission in Assassin's Creed.